Welcome to Front and Center, from political battlefields to cooperative playing fields. Hello, I'm Michael Maxeni, and my partner Steve Berryman and I are going to continue a conversation with Nancy Vogl. I hope you've watched the first segment, and Steve gave a more complete introduction to Nancy. But for those of you who are just joining us, because the subject that we're going to try to unpack a little bit here, and we're not experts about it, and it's not an in-depth study of it for sure, but we hope to spark some curiosity and open up some people's minds and thinking about a very important and controversial issue right now around the topic of critical race theory, referred to as CRT. So it's an important topic. We hope you'll stay with us. We'll hope that you will expand your thinking after listening to this conversation with Nancy and Steve and I. Steve, is there anything you want to add to that? If not, let's get into this.
Okay, well, I just want to say that Nancy Vogl was founding member of one of the first feminist rock bands in the 1970s, performed at an international women's rock festival in Germany. She's worked with, if you watch the first or listen to the first segment, James and Grace Lee Boggs, who were pioneers in political organizing in Detroit. She's worked with youth for the past 40 years, the Sonoma County's LGBTQI support group, and now she's on the advisory board of the Commonsense Party of California. So welcome back, Nancy, and let's dive in. You know, obviously you were involved in working with the Boggses. You were certainly exposed to many ideas about racism, about the sources, the causes, the impacts, and so on. You've seen it from many different standpoints. And now it seems that this critical race theory is sort of a political football that is being misheard, misinterpreted, misunderstood, misrepresented, and it's become kind of a area of controversy. So let's talk about that. What is critical race theory and how did it begin?
Well, the actual critical race theory is from legal scholars from the mid 80s. And I'm remiss in not knowing the book that it came from. It's a book by a legal professor. There were 3 professors, and it posits that the racism that is endemic to the United States that very few people can deny. I mean, it would be very challenging to say that this country didn't have hundreds of years of demonstrated discrimination. That's almost impossible to deny. So the actual theory is that racism by the people who were elected, by the people who were judges, by the people who were in every town in America, that sentiment was embedded in the laws that were made. And so if you have that racist ideological positioning, when you are on the real estate board, you would say, wait a minute. If blacks moved into this neighborhood, then the price is going to go down. So we're going to make a line in every town and we'll put the African-American population here and we'll allow the white people to be here. And so what they're saying is that the racism that is endemic to our history is embedded in the laws that have been created, period. That's what critical race theory is. The way it's being used, I think, is to foment divisiveness and to foment fear, because I don't think it's really that people don't want a certain kind of history to be taught. It's that they don't want white children to feel guilty. So I want to make a big distinction between the actual fact of definitions of what is critical race theory and the question of how is it that we teach American history in our schools, and the emotional component that's not being acknowledged nationwide by saying, yes, well, I can't really deny that there was an Indian massacre. I can't really deny that we have excluded African Americans from certain jurisdictions, we can't really deny that. But the main thing is, I don't want to feel guilty about it. I don't want to change, and I don't want my kids to feel guilty. That emotional component, I think, is really the issue that is driving this conversation. But I don't hear it spoken about very much. And I could be wrong. Okay, I could be wrong. I'm just saying what I see. That's what I see, because critical race theory, in another way of saying it, is the history of the United States.
Nancy, in the way that you put it there and the way you see it, which can't be denied, that's the way you see it. And I'll try to present how it's seen from the other side.
Okay.
And that feeling of guilt is absolutely true. The way it's being positioned or perceived by many people, and again, we're not experts on this without bringing in a lot of the studies, but what I hear, what I see from talking to people and reading, there is a direct pushback fight. It's like the Proctologist View of American history has been described in one time. That's what they're trying to teach our children and make us feel guilty, etc. Well, it brings us back to an early conversation that we had earlier in our show, our program called Lost People. And the issue of redlining, which is how you described it with the line, it's called redlining, is the technical term for it, where they created districts that only people of color would be excluded from. Right. Those really exist. And people really did do things consciously and some just subconsciously.
Right.
But this issue of racism in America, what I think one of the big resentment points is that it's all about like, we're the only ones as a country that's done it. And yet racism exists in every country to varying degrees, and blacks on blacks, Chinese on Chinese, whatever race, whatever nationality. And one of the points we tried to bring out earlier in one of our interviews called Lost People was a great interaction between Tom Hartman and an indigenous gentleman, elder in Australia, who had been born as a half Aborigines, half white, and been taken from his home at 3, sold into slavery, escaped from slavery. And as an elder now, many years later, he has this conversation with Tom, and Tom says, don't you just hate those white people for what they did to you? And he said, no, what they did to me had been done to them. And he delved into that a little more, because what happened to the Western Europeans, and every culture throughout the world has had some genocide perpetrated on them at some time. And so I think what is important and being missed and left out of these conversations is the fact that we've all experienced at some point this kind of racism, traumas. And now it's like, folks, if we're going to have America that we want to live in, if we're going to have a more beautiful and just world, instead of trying to make people feel guilty of the past, we need to bring that forth and understand it totally, how the interactions occurred, what happened truly there between the indigenous people, the black slaves, and the white European settlers and the rest of them, and how people have treated each other so poorly for centuries. But until we learn to forgive each other for the past and help each other, take each other from where we are today, arm in arm, and with compassion and understanding for each and every one of our journeys being different and painful, and if forgive each other, then we can begin to move forward. If we try to beat up on people because of the past, of what some other ancestor did to some other ancestor, only gets people, if it's done in a insensitive way, only gets people continuing to fight against each other and resist it. Your ancestor did this to my ancestors, and it's a fight. It's like, that's not getting us anywhere. So I think that's a big.
Mike, I have to say, you predicated this on I don't want to have to, we don't want to have to feel guilty. And what I'm saying is, nobody said that. Nobody wants whites to feel guilty. People of color and people who've been marginalized by the dominant white, predominantly male patriarchy want some acknowledgement that that in fact has been done. It's not a question of making people feel guilty, because guilt is useless. It doesn't matter. Nobody wants somebody to feel bad about it. But until we acknowledge, yes, that happened, that sucks. If I were there today, I wouldn't have let that happen. But nobody's even talking about that, Mike. They're just saying, don't touch it, don't go there, don't go there. And I'm saying that is what is the crux of the issue, because very few people are saying what you're saying. You say that you're representing your constituents in a kind of a way, but
No, I'm trying to put forth what I hear and the
well,
arguments.
that's what I'm saying. You're
Yeah.
representing what you're hearing.
Right.
And in a way, I mean, in a perfect world, what you say is absolutely true. Everybody has been traumatized. Trauma-informed care is now the hottest thing in public health, because the fact is it's true. We have people walking around who are the walking wounded, who are not capable of functioning as effective, parents or whatever. And that's a real pandemic. So I gather that's true. The other thing, it's a little bit like saying Black lives matter. No, all lives matter. You're right, they do. But if this house is on fire, is the fire truck going to come and put out the whole block, or are they going to focus on that house? And what people of color, the people that I'm hearing from, people of color are saying, hey, can you focus on the house for once? Can you tell us it's burning? Then we'll come over and help put out the fire in your house. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, I absolutely do.
Okay.
And I absolutely, I'm smiling if it's on speaker view or gallery view. I'm
All right.
smiling from ear to ear,
Okay.
because the answer you gave is exactly what I was hoping would come forth, because you're right. I look back and it gets me, I have to control my passion to think how many years I was a teenager when Martin Luther King and what was going on then. And here I am now at this late age in my life. And where in the hell has the progress been, folks? Come on. How long should people have to wait?
Right.
Some of the most warm people, loving people that I've ever been fortunate in my life to meet are people of color. And I don't think of them. Some of them, my most endearing friends. And it's like, how long are they expected to wait? How long, folks, are you going to hold on to this, allow this issue of thinking of your, because of your insecurity, to think you need to feel superior to somebody else and not to recognize their equal humanity? It's like, I get really frustrated with it. That's why we're doing what we're doing. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here, because we've got to help people go, come on, folks, how long are they expected to wait?
Yeah.
I sure as shit wouldn't be sitting on my, letting it just go on generation after generation. We've got to, it's time now to make that change. And we now have the ability, because of technology and where we are, we're being thrown together. And now it's like, come on, folks, let's understand each other. Let's forgive each other. Let's work together. Come on. How long are we going to not work together and help each other?
And just to add one more thing, my partner is a professional educator and has been for 46 years, and assures all the people on her school board and parents that critical race theory is not being taught. Inquiry, exploration, research, all of the things that a student would do in school, that's what's being taught. So there is no critical race theory class. There's ethnic studies, because people have gotten together and say, hey, there's some people left out of the history books, we'd like to be in. Okay. So now there's ethnic studies, but it's not like there is CRT embedded in social studies or math, or it doesn't exist. So I want to put that out for someone who's on the fence about this, that it's really being overblown. It's being fear. What is it when you use fear as a torch? I really think it's being overblown.
Yeah, and hopefully people, when they hear our brief exchange here, will hopefully have some curiosity to go, this phrase that we use, seeking the whole truth together.
Mhm.
It's history was written by the victors. It's his story. I mean, that's where it comes from. And it's like, hey, folks, we now have the opportunity to go back and really uncover aspects of the history from many different perspectives and build a holistic view of our history. And from that view, we can really begin to see, wow, it was really tough on a lot of people. And I love this new 1883 show, because it really brings forth a clear understanding of the innocence and ignorance of many, not all, many of those Western settlers, from Western European settlers who came here and were thrown out into this land with the indigenous natives, who it was their land that they lived on for centuries and generations, and they were being put out there, and the interactions, most of the conflicts were really out of ignorance and fear for each other. And then you throw in the government. This is where the government goes back, where the government now really screwed things up, because now they throw in the military, and they went in and cleared the path by killing out the Indians, making treaty after treaty that they then broke every single one of them. Took these people from these beautiful lands and put them out in the shithole parts of the country, and expected them somehow to all of a sudden magically turn parts of this country that nobody wanted to live in into flowering gardens. It's like, and so it's like, come on, folks. But and this truth needs to come out. We need to hear this. People need to not be made to feel guilty of it because their ancestors participated in it, but to be able to go, thank God I was born now, and now I have an opportunity to help move us forward.
Exactly.
Go, that was a really ugly, difficult period.
That's right, Mike.
Suffered a lot.
I mean, that's really it. It's not about feeling guilty. It's about taking stock and saying, hey, it's a different time. It's a different place. What can we do now that's different? And have the
what
courage.
Can we do now?
Yeah.
What can we do now to create that more beautiful and just world, that America that we do want to live in?
Right.
When we look around at the so many issues that we've got to start solving, and that goes back to this point about getting government on the side of the people and getting off of the political battlefield, so that we can begin to cooperate together, rehumanize each other, and start to cooperate. And then from there, we can build partnerships and realize that all of our goals, most all of our goals, are very similar. People want to be loved, they want to be respected, they want to have equal opportunity, and let's help each other, and let's do this now.
I would caution when we say, that government is the problem. I mean, my feelers go up, and I just, and my reaction is the governance that we have created is no longer functioning.
Right.
So it's not that I'm anti-government. It's that the log jam, the ego, the practices and behaviors of so many people in government, that is what we need to look at. It's not that I'm anti-government. It's that we need to create new structures.
Yeah, let me clarify. That's why we say get government on the side of the people.
Yeah.
It's not that we're against government. No, not at all. And that phrase, get government on the side of the people, means we want to make government, instead of a hindrance, and a government that supports crony capitalism and supports systems that do have racist tendencies built into. We can fix those, but we've got to get government, instead of on the side of the few, on the side of the special interests, on the side of the moneyed globalists, get it on the side of the people to facilitate, be a facilitator to the cooperation, a facilitator to bring people together, instead of purposefully dividing people. It could be a facilitator.
The reason I'm so anxious right now is that I have a perfect example of this, is that it was put out to marijuana farmers, small farmers, that with the legalization of pot, that it would be a herald in a new age. Not only would it be legal, but the work they would do to make their farms legal and to come up to code and to do all the things that registration and legislation would make it possible. It was put out that all that would happen and that it would be dedicated to the small farmers. So who's moved in? Bayer, Gallo, you know,
Big
I don't know if it's
corporations.
Gallo, but big
Big corporations.
corporations
Yeah.
have moved in. And now many of the small farmers that did the worst, that the most, to look at spotted owls, to look at water, look at toxic water flow, to look at every, fish and game and clearing some of the trees. So some of the farmers that did the most to make it right are now going out of business because now it's not profitable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a perfect example. Somebody got to somebody, in Sacramento, and now the legalization process is now not focusing on the small farms at all. So a lot of them are going to either go underground again, which then we're going to have to deal with ecological issues, right? Because you don't have fish and game, you don't have species protection, you don't have water analysis. And so there it is. That's something that is really sad right now.
And that's just one example of so many. And Steve, I got to shut up for a minute.
What you just brought up is really, I mean, we have such a confluence of tragic conditions happening right now, economic, environmental, and so on, that these things all happening at once. It's certainly important for this issue to be reconciled, because like a family, if there's a perpetration in a family and that perpetration goes unacknowledged, it toxifies the whole situation. So our well-being as a country has been toxified by our history and the unacknowledged aspects of it. Mm-hmm. And yet we can all find common ground in that the exploitation and extraction and domination system is still in place. And it's taken on the, I mean, obviously, you can see the difference between people of color and people who are white. And so there's a very easy way to discriminate in that regard. Mm-hmm. But the economic discrimination and the economic issues is at a certain level colorblind. And so we're dealing, a lot of the people who are taking exception to this and feel like, what is this? The white replacement theory, where white people are going to be replaced by people of color who are coming across the border in droves and et cetera, et cetera. That fear is partly fomented by the extractor system that has impacted all of those working people, like the auto workers I used to teach in Detroit. So in this particular issue, I want to get back to the critical race theory and race issue. How do we actually create truth and reconciliation and reparations? And how does this get acknowledged in a way, not like Black History Month or anything like that, expanding it to Black History Quarter or something like that, but how do we actually take this issue and create completion around it so that there is an acknowledgement and a welcoming of everybody into our system? How do we do that? How long is that going to take?
Great question.
Yeah. I'm putting you on the spot.
I mean, I'd say conversations. I mean, that's what it takes. Conversations, deep conversations with people who are willing to listen to one another. And in the local level, I mean, we're talking about having one of those conversations here. A person here down in another town, we're talking about bringing people together to initiate a conversation like that. There was a town in the South, and there's a nonprofit organization, and unfortunately I lost the packet 20 years ago, but there are processes that they will come into a town and they bring people together, and you have three choices. And so for a positioned paper, they'll take that whatever issue is the challenging issue of that town. They do a left, right, and a center position, and people take a seat wherever they are. And then there are prompts for specific conversations about that issue. And we did it in Petaluma about 20 years ago. And it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal when you got people together, because then you can really hear why someone feels that way. And you say, oh, I didn't know exactly like that. And it really, really is powerful. And I imagine that if people have it together, more things like that will happen. And we'll have these conversations when more and more people are tired of the polemics and the criminalization of another point of view, where someone's, becomes the enemy. I mean, for my mind, I think for me, it started with, boy, my brain is just not working today. The personalization of politics during the early 80s. Newt Gingrich was the first one I feel
94,
like began to make the opposite opinion the enemy, to weaponize a particular platform that then personalized it, as opposed to the old story that we would hear that, who a Republican and Democrat would go out for drinks together after Congress, they'd all go out and they'd talk. But it was at that time that the other person became the enemy. And it was a strategy, but I think it's backfired miserably for the country.
Well, that's a good segue into a little promotion I'm going to do right now before we close off this conversation, which is far too brief on CRT. But the Commonsense Party, and I encourage our audience to go to, quite simply, CA, obviously for California, cacommonsense.org. And one of the things the Commonsense Party is bringing people like Nancy, myself, Steve, and others. We're trying to be a seed to create a new party that will represent that roughly 70–80% of Americans who truly see these problems, are tired of this constant battle, who want to work together and bring their voices into it, not just to be a voice, but to be an active participant. And through the Commonsense Party, we hope to be able to bring the indigenous wisdom in with the modern thinking, to bring the feminist vision with the masculine, to bring the conservative and the progressive, those vast differences into the room. So just as you said, Nancy, it takes that kind of diverse perspectives to get the best thinking so that you can come up with the best solutions that will work towards the solving the problems. Because the individual path we take to a solution that we can all agree on is almost irrelevant to most anybody, as long as they can see that it's fair and it will solve the problem. People are amazing. They will sacrifice of themselves to contribute to a solution that will work. And that's what the Commonsense Party about. We don't care if people are Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Greens, Independents, whatever, as long as you have integrity. Back to the core principles that your parents taught you and my parents taught me and Steve's were taught to him and many, many others. It's about integrity, and it's up to the voters then to choose a person whose words and actions will mirror each other so they can trust them, and then they'll elect them as their representative to go to Sacramento and work on these changes, or to go to city council, because local is key. It starts at local and works up, but our Sacramento government is absolutely essential to get working with the people, all the people, and not just some of the people. So
yeah, just want to add one thing, and that there are organizations right now like Living Room Conversations and Braver Angels that could actually gear conversations around this specific issue. So that, and I agree that rehumanization is really important. It's essential, because if you're sitting face to face with somebody, it's very hard to stereotype them, particularly after you've heard their story.
Right.
I grew up in a housing project as one of the few white kids there, mostly black neighborhood in New York. So I thought I had a perspective. And then when the Black Lives Matters thing happened, my wife just happened to find an old video DVD of the TV series Roots. and we watched the whole thing, however many hours it was, and it was so eye-opening as to the dehumanization and treachery and evil that occurred in that you go, whatever experience I've had in my life has nothing to do with any of that. I've got stuff I'm also Jewish, and I have stuff in my DNA about that. But people who've had that happen, who are ripped from their homes and existence like that, and put on ships and chained up, that's got to be in the DNA, and it has to be in the unspoken trauma that's passed forward one generation to the next. So I recommend that for anybody that wants to actually
rewatch it,
understand that experience.
And this issue of being burned into DNA is there on various levels of so many. But one of the most important and tragic things that gets me and many others so upset is the issue of slavery today, and that slavery goes on to this day right around in our own communities. And it's a huge problem that is not being talked about, that needs to be worked on and helped resolved as well. I hope that people are enjoying the conversation we're having with Nancy. We want to come back for a third and final segment of this conversation before we wear out. And we want to talk a little bit about an important, again, controversial issue about this topic of pronouns and the use of pronouns and genderqueer, and how that's being taught or needs to be taught by parents and teachers, et cetera. So come back and watch that. Again, we hope you're enjoying our show here. I want to thank Nancy again and want her to stick around where we're going to continue this conversation. So thanks again for watching. And if you're on Locals platform or Rumble, please consider becoming a supporter so that Steve and I can continue our work. And if you're watching on YouTube or listening to our audio podcasts on either Apple, Spotify, or whatever platform you're on, please subscribe, please like and share, and tell your friends about it. From political battlefields to cooperative playing fields. And may we make America the America that we want. It's a long journey to the more beautiful and just world our hearts know is possible. Let's go there together. Thank you very much. Please come back and watch us on segment 3, when we're going to talk about genderqueer and use of pronouns. Thank you again.